The story kicks off with a man frantically running through a dense forest, clearly being pursued by someone. Eventually, he is caught and killed. But who was he? Who was after him? And why was he targeted? The answers to these questions unfold as the film progresses. The following day, we are introduced to a family enjoying a vacation in their RV. Keith, his wife Catherine, and their two children, Amy and Jeffrey, had traveled far from the city, seeking solitude in a remote location. They appeared to be a content and close-knit family. As Keith prepared a meal for them, everyone eagerly dug in, except for Amy. She seemed upset and chose to distance herself from the RV, skipping dinner. The real reason behind her mood soon became clear. She had sneaked away to smoke, something her father strongly disapproved of, as he was firmly against substance use. As she stood there, two local young men approached her. Their demeanor and way of speaking immediately gave off an unsettling vibe, suggesting that they weren't the kind of people one would want to cross paths with in such a secluded place. Their names were Richard and Billy, and their presence hinted at trouble ahead. This area was rarely visited. In fact, almost no one ever came here to spend time. Richard and Billy, two locals, were searching for their older brother Melior, who had gone missing the previous night. While looking for him, they approached the vacationing family, hoping for information. Keith, wanting to avoid any unnecessary conflict, treated them with politeness. He calmly explained that they hadn't seen anyone, as they had only just arrived in the area. In an innocent gesture, Keith's young son, Jeffrey, offered Richard a chocolate, perhaps as a way to make friends. Just then, Amy returned, catching Richard and Billy's attention. Since city folks were a rare sight in this remote place, the two young men seemed somewhat flustered at the sight of her. Noticing their reaction, Keith immediately told his daughter to go inside. Afterward, he firmly asked Richard and Billy to leave them alone. Though they responded with a few cryptic remarks, they eventually left. Shortly after, the family resumed their journey in their RV, continuing down the isolated road. They were a well-mannered and peaceful family, not used to such unsettling encounters. However, fate had other plans. A little farther ahead, they once again came across Richard and Billy. This time, the two men's vehicle was stopped in the middle of the road. Keith and Catherine immediately felt uneasy, especially because Richard was now holding a shotgun. A sense of fear crept over Catherine, and she urged her husband not to stop. Instead, she insisted that they should just drive past. But Keith hesitated and eventually pulled over. With a smirk, Richard greeted them, pretending to be amused by the coincidence. He claimed that their car had broken down and asked if they could lend a hand. Sensing Catherine's growing fear, Keith declined, hoping to avoid trouble. Richard, however, remained unfazed. He casually responded, "That's fine. You don't have to help. Just take Billy with you. Our house is on your way." Keith knew refusing outright might provoke them, so despite his discomfort, he reluctantly agreed. Billy was a simple-minded young man. As they traveled, Jeffrey engaged him in a word game, but it quickly became clear that Billy wasn't as quick-witted as him. Meanwhile, Keith struck up a conversation, asking Billy about his family. Billy casually shared that he lived with his two cousins, his grandfather, his brother, and himself. Up until this point, the film had carefully built an atmosphere suggesting that this seemingly innocent family might end up as victims. However, things took a shocking turn when Billy picked up Jeffrey's notebook and discovered handwriting that looked eerily familiar. It was Melior's. The realization dawned on him too late. Before he could react, Jeffrey sprang into action, swiftly strangling Billy with a wire. The most unsettling part? The rest of the family didn't seem disturbed by it at all. There was no shock, no panic, only mild concern about the mess Billy's blood might make in their RV. And that's when the film delivered its most chilling twist. This family wasn't what they appeared to be. The people we assumed were the villains, Richard, Billy, and their missing brother, were actually the innocent ones. It was Keith, Catherine, Amy, and Jeffrey who were the real monsters. Not only were they murderers, but they were also cannibals. The horrifying truth unraveled. Melior, the man who had gone missing the night before, had been their victim. The meat they had been eating during lunch at the beginning of the film, it had been his. With practiced efficiency, the family worked together to dismember Billy. As a gruesome reward, Keith handed a piece of Billy's flesh to Amy, acknowledging her restraint in controlling her temper, just as Jeffrey had. Normally, Keith and his family didn't break into people's homes to hunt. Instead, they preyed on travelers, people who were alone or wouldn't be missed, ensuring they could kill without drawing attention. But tonight, Keith decided to change the plan. "We're going to their house," he declared. "Let's see what we can find there for ourselves." Meanwhile, at their home, Billy's grandfather and his cousins, Julie and Savannah, were sitting down for dinner when they heard a knock at the door. Expecting it to be Billy, they went to answer, only to find Keith and his family standing there instead. Savannah and Julie exchanged confused glances before asking, "What are you doing here?" Keith put on a friendly smile and explained, "Our RV broke down, and we couldn't find another house nearby. We were hoping to get some help. We ran into Billy on the way, and he told us to come here." Julie hesitated but then nodded, stepping aside to let them in. Grandpa, who rarely had visitors, warmly welcomed them. No one had any reason to suspect that the family standing before them were killers. With dinner already prepared, everyone sat down to eat. Keith's family, however, felt out of place among normal people. They weren't used to being guests. Though they made polite conversation and showered their hosts with fake compliments, they despised this entire situation. Savannah, however, felt uneasy. Something about them didn't sit right. She decided to press for more details. "If you met Billy on the way, why didn't he come with you?" Catherine quickly covered up, responding smoothly, "He told us he needed to find Melior first." Just as Keith and his children were preparing to make their move and eliminate the entire family, something unexpected happened. Someone else entered the scene, Julie's husband, a towering, muscular man known as Big Mac. Keith immediately realized that this was a problem. If they tried anything, there was no way they could take on someone like him. Even with all their experience in killing, Big Mac was built like a beast. If he fought back, Keith wouldn't stand a chance. Sensing the tension, Julie laughed. "Mac works all day and eats like a horse. He's always starving when he gets home." Night had already fallen, and leaving now would seem strange. Besides, Keith's family had no intention of going anywhere until they got what they came for. Amy needed to use the washroom, but since there was an issue with it, Savannah went along to help. While they were there, they both realized that Amy was interested in girls. Savannah had been suspicious of the family, but after this moment with Amy, she chose to ignore her doubts and let go of her unease about having strangers in their home. Julie then came to tell them that Amy would be staying in Savannah's room for the night. Jeffrey was given Billy's small room, which he didn't like, but to stick to their plan, he pretended to be happy with it. Keith and Catherine were given separate rooms as well. Meanwhile, Richard was still waiting outside for Billy. As he stood there, a deputy arrived, and it seemed like there was some tension between them over something. The deputy offered to give Richard a ride home, but Richard refused, telling him that some tourists from Los Angeles had visited, and he had sent Billy with them. He expected Billy to return soon. The deputy left, but Richard started feeling sick. Unbeknownst to him, the chocolates Jeffrey had been handing out were poisoned. Richard had eaten one earlier, and now the effects were kicking in. He had no idea that his family was in serious danger. Back at the house, Catherine spoke to Keith, expressing her uneasiness. "This doesn't feel right. We don't hunt like this. Maybe we should just leave." But Keith refused. "These people are poor. They have no real purpose in life. Killing them won't matter. No one will care." Jeffrey had already given the poisoned chocolates to everyone in the house. Keith's plan was simple. Once the poison took effect, they would make their move. Interestingly, despite being a murderer and a cannibal, Keith refused to carry a gun. He believed it would set a bad example for the children. The irony was clear. He had no problem killing people, cutting them into pieces and eating them. But in his mind, smoking and carrying a firearm were unacceptable. We learned that Savannah is not just a kind-hearted girl, but also an excellent student. She is highly skilled in archery and had even secured admission to a college. However, she chose to stay behind to take care of her ailing grandfather, putting her education on hold for her family's sake. Meanwhile, Keith had a private talk with his son, Jeffrey. He explained the next step in their plan. "Listen, son, once the poison starts working, I'll take care of Big Mac. Stay out of it. You'll have your chance to kill someone later." Jeffrey agreed. "All right, I'll stay away from Big Mac." Before long, the effects of the poisoned chocolates began to take hold. Julie started vomiting, and soon after, Big Mac also fell ill. Since Julie was already in the washroom, Big Mac had no choice but to step outside, leaving him vulnerable. In another room, Savannah and Amy had a heart-to-heart conversation. Both revealed that they weren't interested in boys. Amy confided, "My mom is okay with it, but my dad is old-fashioned, so I've kept it a secret from him. I even have a girlfriend, Blade, but my dad thinks Blade is a guy." She then shared a personal wish. "I just want to live a normal life, away from my family." Savannah, unaware of how truly dangerous Amy's family was, thought Amy was simply talking about an overprotective household. She had no idea that the people she was welcoming into her home were killers. As their conversation continued, the two grew closer, oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold in their home. Despite his father's orders, Jeffrey sneaked outside with a knife, determined to kill Big Mac. But taking down a man with that name wouldn't be easy for a teenage boy. Jeffrey lunged at him, stabbing wildly. At first, Big Mac remained calm, trying to fend him off. But as the attacks continued and he was badly injured, his patience ran out. He could have easily crushed Jeffrey in a single blow, but the poison in his system suddenly took effect. He doubled over, vomiting uncontrollably. Taking advantage of the moment, Jeffrey swiftly slit his throat, killing him. Inside the house, Keith was about to kill Grandpa with an axe when he glanced out the window and saw Jeffrey standing over Big Mac's lifeless body. Keith was furious that his son had disobeyed him. But before he could react, Grandpa suddenly woke up. Without hesitation, Keith brought the axe down, killing him instantly. After that, Keith dragged Jeffrey back inside, where he and Catherine scolded him for not following their orders. Keith blamed Catherine, insisting that she was the reason their children were losing discipline and straying from their tradition. Despite his anger, he still rewarded Jeffrey in a twisted way by giving him a piece of Big Mac's tongue as a gift. Meanwhile, in Savannah's room, Amy and Savannah were getting closer. But Amy had an ulterior motive. She was planning to kill Savannah. Just as she pulled out a hidden knife, she slipped and fell off the bed, accidentally stabbing herself in the leg. Savannah, shocked, asked what had happened. Amy quickly covered up her mistake. "I keep it for self-defense," she said. Wanting to help, Savannah left the room to find a first aid kit. That's when she noticed something strange. Their RV was parked nearby, even though they had claimed it was broken down. Her suspicions grew when she overheard Keith and Catherine talking in hushed voices. Curious and uneasy, she waited until they left, then slipped inside the RV. What she found inside made her blood run cold. Human organs. Now she knew the horrifying truth. Her instincts had been right all along. The only reason she hadn't figured it out sooner was because Amy had distracted her. Back in the house, Julie finally stepped out of the washroom. When she saw Grandpa's lifeless body, she let out a terrified scream. Before she could react, Keith grabbed her and dragged her to the dining room. He turned to Catherine. "You have to kill her," he said coldly. "You've changed too much. Do this in front of our son." Jeffrey stood by, watching. Catherine hesitated but eventually stepped forward, ready to carry out the order. But just as she raised the weapon, an arrow shot through her neck. She collapsed to the floor, dying right in front of Keith and Jeffrey. The shooter? Savannah. Earlier, it was mentioned that she was skilled in archery, and now that skill had saved her life. Amy rushed downstairs and saw her mother's body. She broke down in tears, blaming her father. "This is all your fault," she screamed. "We should never have messed with this family." Keith, however, remained calm. "If we let that girl live, we'll get caught," he said. "We have to kill her." Keith tied Julie to a chair and ordered her to call her sister. When she refused, he started torturing her, making her scream in pain. Meanwhile, Savannah managed to sneak into the house and tried to call the police, but she couldn't finish the conversation before the line cut off. The deputy who had spoken to Richard earlier reported this to the sheriff, but the sheriff didn't take it seriously and left it to the deputy to handle. Back in the house, Jeffrey sensed that someone else was there. Suspicious, he started moving toward the room where Savannah was hiding. Thinking quickly, Savannah managed to grab his knife, turning the tables. She held it to his throat and forced him downstairs, using him as leverage. Threatening Keith, she demanded, "Let Julie go, or I'll kill your son." But Keith wasn't intimidated. Instead, he grabbed Julie and threatened to kill her. Savannah had no choice but to drop the knife. Immediately, she was overpowered and tied to a chair alongside Julie. Keith, now completely unhinged, began cooking pieces of their family members as if preparing a meal. He even forced Julie to bring him meat from her own husband, Big Mac. As if that wasn't cruel enough, he then cut off one of Julie's fingers. Savannah knew she had to do something to break Keith's control, so she blurted out, "Your daughter is a lesbian. She also does drugs. She's been hiding it from you." Keith, being old-fashioned and unable to accept this, immediately turned his rage toward Amy. Instead of focusing on Savannah and Julie, he began arguing with his daughter, calling it unnatural and against nature. Savannah seized an opportunity and stabbed Keith in the eye with a fork. As she tried to fight back, Amy caught her, and Keith, enraged, began stabbing Savannah's eye in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Richard arrived with a shotgun, but before he could shoot, Keith struck him on the head. Jeffrey, intending to burn the house down, tried to kill Savannah, but she threw boiling water on his face and strangled him to death. Downstairs, Keith killed Richard, but Julie had managed to free herself. She took an axe and ended Keith's life. Now only 3 remained, Amy, Julie, and Savannah. But in a shocking twist, Amy killed Julie as well. Savannah and Amy then fought viciously, with Amy seriously injuring her. As Amy stumbled outside crying, a deputy arrived. Misreading the situation, he shot Savannah, assuming Amy was the victim. The film's unsettling ending revealed Amy's true nature. Deep down, she was relieved to be free of her family. As the deputy prepared to take her to the hospital, she killed him too. Smiling, she drove away in the RV, leaving behind a trail of bloodshed. Beyond its themes of cannibalism and slasher horror, the film carried a deeper message: how society often judges people by appearances. Those who seem good and well-mannered can hide true evil, while the poor are often disregarded. Keith saw their victims as disposable, believing no one would care about them. But in the end, he paid the ultimate price. That concludes the story. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.